it was there, right? Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to jump to that actual book and read it. Okay, the Pre-Adamite or Who Tempted Eve, Scripture and Science in Unison as Respects the Antiquity of Man, by A. Hoyle Lester. So the people out there that say science, religion and science can't agree. Well, obviously they're completely wrong, aren't they? Okay, if it contained Scripture about a pre-Adamic being, then it's discovered centuries later. One backs up the other, doesn't it? So they both are in agreement. Okay, so the Pre-Adamite or Who Tempted Eve, Scripture and Science in Unison as Respects the Antiquity of Man, by A. Hoyle Lester. And there's a quote there: "Let wisdom with all her science trace mankind of yore," or probably of old, or years gone by, centuries gone by, "and where begins the race, where born, and when, let all his traits appear, characteristics, his history solve, through each revolving year." So, these people are like continually researching, trying to find the origins of man. Okay, the true origins of man. Where did man originally originate from? And it's dedicated to this person by the author. Entered according to Act of Congress in the year 1874 by A. Hoyle Lester in the office of the Librarian of Congress at Washington, USA. To the reader, for convenience of reference, the author deemed it necessary to insert a chronological table which gives the computations of various parties who have devoted much time to the subject, which is denominated the short or received chronology, and the long chronology, which gives the dates of the principal periods from the creation of the world to the birth of Christ. And there's the chronological table there demonstrated. Archbishop Usher's computation as above has been universally adopted as found in the margin of the authorized English version of the Bible. Well, we remember looking in the Schofield Bible that we somehow got hold of, and it mentioned this Usher, and he claimed he knew the exact date or thereabouts when God began his creation. What was it? 4000 BC or something. So he knew the day, the date, I don't know about the time, but the month and the year, right? All this sort of stuff. But someone else said, well, how? I don't even think it, maybe it wasn't in the Schofield footnotes. How could he know that? Well, maybe it was when we did personal research. Somebody had said, well, how could he say that if the Egyptian mounds were, it's a small prototype to the Egyptian pyramids in Giza and all that. How could that be true, Mr. Usher, when these mounds were around 2,000 years earlier? Something along those lines. Okay. And for the satisfaction of those who take an interest in the ancient history of Egypt, and who may wish to refer to the pyramidal period of the Old Empire, the author has concluded to insert Manetho's system of Egyptian chronology. Many of the anti-historical dynasties are omitted when the Egyptians claim to be ruled over by gods and demigods. And this author states that begin at epoch of Menes or Man, which is the commencement of the historical period of the 30 dynasties. It's to do with the Egyptians, right? It's all there. Up until Egypt was conquered. Okay, 13th dynasty ends on second Persian invasion, 340 BC. Egypt conquered by Alexander the Great, 332 BC. Ptolemaic dynasty began 323 BC. Ptolemaic dynasty ends 44 BC. Roman dynasty began 30 BC. Okay, so back and forth, the Romans had it, the Greeks had it, the Romans had it, the Greeks had it. Yeah. And it looks like the Romans had it in the end. Preface. The intellect of man is progressive and cannot remain stationary while science marks out the line of progress, and revelation does not forbid our going forward in the work of investigation. That the earth is much older than our wisest sages were once willing to admit. Yeah, it's like the Brita or the Genesis, creation, man's origin, or creation. Basically, it states that there's this word yuma in the Brita, the ancient Old Testament Brita, or Genesis in English. Yuma, which means unfathomable, immeasurable, period, eon, era, age, or day with a capital D, because there was no man created to write it down. Exactly when God got up in the morning on Monday, did his creating work, and finished on the Sabbath day, or that day, Sabbath, Saturday, right? There's no one there to actually witness that. Okay, so God takes his time, over say millennium of millenniums. Okay, unfathomable period, immeasurable period. We just don't know when he started his creation work and when he actually finished. Because later on it was a law that was given, right? Okay, here's the days of the week, given these days of the week, and you shall worship on this particular Sabbath day. You got months, you got days, weeks, months, years, okay? And the moon and the sun were part of this lunar solar cycle, or solar lunar, and they were basically there for lights, during the day. The moon was a light at night, but they're also for festivals, markers of festival seasons, days with a capital D, and so forth, according to the scriptures. Okay, so the intellect of man is progressive and cannot remain stationary while science marks out the line of progress. And revelation does not forbid our going forward in the work of investigation. That the earth is much older than our wisest sages were once willing to admit is a fact which science reveals to us almost daily. They'll tell you, 60 million years old, all this stuff, right? Okay, that's just an estimate. Okay, the nearest round figure. Okay, sometimes it varies. Depends on who's telling you, right? The earth is much older than our wisest sages were once willing to admit is a fact which science reveals to us almost daily, and which the theologian unites with us in establishing in a way not at variance with divine revelation. Well, sometimes they tell you, no, these creationists, they say, no, young creationists, no, it's only 6,000 years old. Man started, was made 6,000 years ago. But the original ancient, very old T.M.O.T or Abrahamic, Old Testament, etc., disproves that. Okay? With the very words yuma, or unfathomable, immeasurable period. You just don't know when God actually started and when he actually finished, right? His creation work. The Bible and science move together harmoniously, and where there are seeming inconsistencies, there can be no controversy. Our interpretation of Scripture is either incorrect and needs modification to place it in harmony with the progress of science, and that's what the Tab Esrit Shana Artika Saprea, Brita, the Aramaic, or Genesis does. It's in line with the science, right? It agrees with archaeological findings and science. So it's in harmony with the progress of science. Or else the scientist has failed in his deductions and presents a dogma which has an existence only in theory and not in fact. Who believed 50 years ago, from when this was written and published, that the lightnings of heaven would be used to transmit our messages from zone to zone, and from the sea to the uttermost parts of the earth? And yet Job declares in chapter 35, can Canst thou send lightnings? Can you send lightnings? That they may go and say unto you, here we are. The same may be said in regard to the powers of steam, when Job describes Leviathan as emitting flames from its nostrils and ploughing the vastly deep until its pathway becomes hoary with phosphorescent light. Okay, that's a mythical sea beast, right? Supposedly in the depths, created in the depths at the very beginning of creation, etc. When the creatures, big giant creatures, were created, etc., etc. Science reveals to us the revolutions of all the planets upon the axes, like as an X, and a myriad of worlds beyond our own system. It's probably saying axis, but they put here axes. Genesis 1:4-5, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There is no want of harmony in all this, and yet how slow was the Christian world in adopting this new system of astronomy. The unity of the human race is comparatively a new theory, which has been strongly maintained by the translators of the English versions of the Bible, and possibly these modern Americanized English Bibles translations. However, the ancient world and the Jews particularly believe firmly in the diversity of the human family, and all nations under the sun and every age who have held intercourse with the dark races have regarded them as distinct in character and as constituting intellectually an inferior type of the genus Homo, or general man, right? Or that original man, maybe. Not too sure on that Latin, but we know that the last word is talking about men. AHL. Let's have a look at it again. All nations under the sun in every age who have held intercourse with the dark races. Okay, so they've mingled, got together and had children. Is that what he's saying? Descendants. Okay, here's the contents page. Or contents page, yeah. Continued. The Pre-Adamite. Chapter 1. Adam is not the first man. Oh no. Some people sigh. Oh no, gasp. Because Christians have told us it was Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel. Cain kills Abel. That's all. There's nobody else. And some will say, oh yeah, but they had children on the side and it's not talked about. Total baloney. Okay, Christians tell us that the church, etc., Judaism, Islam even, say, there's only Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Nobody else. No one else at all. No caveman, no one. Just these four. Okay. Adam not the first man. Together let us beat this ample field, try what the open, what the covert yield, to the latent tracks, the giddy heights explore, of all who blindly creep or sightless soar. Pope. I don't know who that is. I don't think that is the actual Pope. It's this other guy called Pope, who was a philosopher or a poet. That the enlightened mind of the 19th century can content itself with the theory that the Chinese, the Indian and the Negro descended from the same original progenitor is the source of no great astonishment to the thinking man of the present age, as the love of ease and the cherished opinions of the past are ever marked with footprints dear to the memory of man. Consequently, he is indisposed to permit innovations within the precincts of his established views. That Adam was not the father of the above-mentioned races, and was only the ancestor of the Caucasian family, this writer heartily convinced can be established by sound reasoning and good practical sense, and at the same time on a basis not at all antagonistic to the revelations of Holy Writ. So what's he trying to say there? That Adam, the first human being, was not the father of the above-mentioned races. Is that racist? He's talking about the Chinese, the Indian and the Negro. That the enlightened mind of the 19th century can content itself with the theory that the Chinese, the Indian and the Negro descended from the same original progenitor is the source of no great astonishment to the thinking man of the present age. It's the love of ease and etc. etc. The Adam was not the father of the above men. above mentioned races, and so forth, according to this writer. This generation remembers when able theologians contended that the world had only been created about 6,000 years, and that the creation had been perfected by the Almighty in 6 days of the ordinary duration of 24 hours. The investigations of science have exploded this hypothesis, and no person now who makes any pretensions to scientific law would stake his reputation in combating a dogma so thoroughly fixed in the human mind. In opening the bowels of the earth, we trace its history in the various formations through which we pass, and in the peculiar texture of the various deposits which we find embedded beneath its surface. And thus, like the man of science in mastering the organism of the human frame, he becomes familiar with its peculiarities, and tells us its comparative age and the sex to which it belongs. And so with the various races which God in his wisdom and at sundry times has placed on this sublunary sphere, it behooves us to investigate their history, their traits of character, and their origin, or their beginnings. The order of creation, chapter 2, the order of creation. So from the first eternal order ran, and creature linked to creature, man to man. Pope again. The world, when it was first fashioned by the plastic hand of Jehovah, was a barren waste, void and without form. Yes, that's quoting Genesis 1, verse 1 onward. And darkness was upon the face of the deep. Matter assumed shape. Atmosphere with its vivifying influences took wing and sought its equilibrium throughout the immensity of space. Waters were formed and sought their level in the low basins of the earth, hence lakes, seas, and oceans. And light, by the fiat of the Almighty, sprang out from the hidden caverns of immensity, and shot its rays like the fiery chain that springs from the bosom or the midst of the electrified cloud, and swept across the face of a newborn world, and infused animation into the unproductive elements of nature. Day came and went, and the dew and the, that's D-E-W, not J-E-W, and the shower united together and performed their commissioned duties to give life and invigorate the germ which the creative genius of deity had planted in the vast fields which he had recently formed. The grass, the herb, the tree sprang into life, bloomed and shed its fragrance upon the desert air, and ripened its fruit at the new appointed harvest. The waters were moved by the creative hand of deity, or God, and the river and the ocean became alive with the animalculae and the leviathan. It's the beast of the sea, right? Or the waters. Birds winged their rapid flight through the yielding atmosphere and fed upon the varied insects that peopled the luxuriant fields, and sang their morning song and the evening lullaby when their warbling notes as yet fell upon no mortal ear. In the course of many ages, the surface of this earth had parted with its heat, and the active influences of dews and, again D-E-W-S, dews and showers had prepared many portions of the world for the growth and maturity of plants. And no doubt in the lapse of time, vast plains were covered with luxuriant verdure, while other sections were sterile and parched by a meridian sun, by the heat, right, say, i.e. the deserts, and desolated by the scorching fires of active volcanoes. On these fertile plains and prolific slopes, where verdant pastures and flowing brooks could support animal life, God there placed the lower order of the animal creation until times and seasons had passed over the face of nature, and prepared a habitation for the maintenance of a higher order of animal existence. So on thus, from one gradation to another, did he in his wisdom modify and reconstruct by the gradual growth and decomposition of the vegetable kingdom, until the lion, the tiger and the horse, the highest order of the brute creation, could move and have their being amid the forests and jungles of a world which had never as yet echoed to the voice of man. In the ascending series of the creative program comes the monkey, or the lower grade of the quadrumana tribes, and in due course of formation we have the baboon and the orangutan, who occupy their periods in the creative designs of the great I Am, until finally the gorilla, The higher standard of the quadrumana race takes its position among created animals and forms the uniting link between the brute creation and the lower standard of the human family. Ages upon ages, in all probability, had rolled over this mundane sphere since first it was thrown out in the molten state to find its regular orbit and assume shape in winging its trackless flight along the unmeasured paths of immensity. And in fancied dreams we can still behold it blazing like a fiery comet when approaching its perihelion. We may well assume, as respects this world at the age of which we write, that the atmosphere which encircled it was impregnated with the heat arising from internal fires, consequently unfitted for the abode of Adam's race, of whom we shall speak in due time. In the crude and unsublimated condition of the world at this epoch, God saw proper to place a pair of human beings on our orb, or our sphere, or our earth, and invested them, or globe, and invested them with full possession, with all the rights and privileges of the first occupants. He endowed them with speech and with a higher degree of intelligence than that bestowed upon any animal of a former creation. He gave them laws and rules and regulations by which they should be governed, and demanded of them obedience in accordance with his divine behest, and sent them forth to multiply and people the untrodden labyrinths of earth. This was the Negro and his native land, Africa, the same whom the Anglo-Saxon introduced upon the American continent, and wherever found today in his ancestral clime, and whose blood is still unalloyed with the refining influences of a nobler and a higher race. We trace in him all the savage instincts that mark the very beasts that walk the earth. He served this period under the benign sway of divine providence, fell from his high estate, and was permitted to wander adrift and gratify the unholy passions prompted by his unholy nature. Anthropophagy. He preyed upon his fellow man. He sinned away his day of grace, and his kind benefactor permitted him to become a reprobate, given over to a hardness of heart and a reprobation of mind, that he might believe a lie and be lost. The author has stated in the beginning of this discourse that the theory advanced herein in reference to a diversity in the origin of the human races should in no wise conflict with the teachings of Revelation. And he assumed this position, that in the progress of creation and through its various periods, as God saw that the earth, the air, and the water were adapted to the growth and nourishment of the different species with which, in his divine economy, he proposed to people these elements. And age after age, as these necessary changes would take place, he did form and create all the peculiar animal life which has ever existed on this globe, not in one day or in one period, but in different epochs, immeasurable periods, unfathomable periods, eon, eras, days with a capital D. The writer states here, he assumed this position, that in the progress of creation and through its various periods, as God saw that the earth, the air, and the water were adapted to the growth and nourishment of the different species with which, in his divine economy, he proposed to people these elements, and age after age, as these necessary changes would take place, he did form and create all the peculiar animal life which has ever existed on this globe, not in one day or one period, but in different epochs, and in accordance as he saw that these essential changes in nature required nobler creations. Thus he first formed the zoophyte and the lower animals, with every creeping thing, and so on in their regular order until this world became a suitable abode for the lowest caste of the human family. The Negro was introduced and became the sole occupant of this vast territory. He was created black, the better to enable him to endure the intolerable heat to which the world was subjected at this period, and at no time since has he desired to immigrate from the tropical climate which he has inhabited from the first hour of his introduction. So what he's saying here, like this other guy we looked at on what's it called, Pangaea, when the world was first created, as Genesis 1-4 says, the world in the beginning God created heavens and the earth was dark and void, there wasn't any life on there, it's just water. the deep abyss, etc., etc. And then he gives this command for land to appear, and like the Egyptian myth, this land pops up, and then all life starts to emerge from there. First the vegetation, then the animals, then the human being, the pre-Adamics, and then the human being Adam, and then Eve, right? Okay. Okay, so this person on this particular video that we did said that the land was just one big mass, but it sat on these tectonic plates, and eventually they rubbed up against each other, banged into each other, caused a crack, and then one went on top of the other and caused earthquakes. They were shifting, right? These tectonic plates were shifting, caused these earthquakes, volcanoes to erupt, molten lava, all this sort of stuff, and then they split, they separated, and that's why you got these rivers, seas, etc., dividing these countries. So originally Africa, Israel was in Africa, and all this region was Africa. There was no Near East, Middle East, Far East, all this sort of stuff. It was all Africa, apparently, all attached, right? Because if you, like a jigsaw puzzle, get a map and you put all the countries back together, they all fit, apparently. Okay, so everything started with the Africans, and then you have sacredtext.com here, which will, in the column here, it says about Africa, under the topic Africa, about 60,000 years ago, we're all, according to mitochondrial DNA, we're all from Africa. We all originated from Africa. There's a small group of 100 or less that were in Africa, and according to mitochondrial DNA, we're all from Africa with this sort of stuff. Then you can go look at it, and perhaps it'll tell you. It says before the Europeans came in and corrupted everything and changed everything. The text, these African text and all that sort of stuff, these writings. That's how it was. Okay, so this person on this video is basically saying, Africa, Israel, they're all one, etc., etc. Where's the Middle East? There is no Middle East, because there has to be Upper East, there has to be a Lower East, there has to be a Left East, Right East, and all this sort of stuff, right? Yeah. So why isn't there a Left America and a Right America, Upper America, Lower America, Middle America, this sort of stuff, right? It's quite an interesting video. Okay, so he's making these claims that the black people were first. As the black people, the Hebrew Israelites, Afro-Americans say, they were first, and everybody else is albino, come from them, or this sort of stuff, Yeah. And then the author here states, he further assumed that the next creation of a higher order was a Malay, also an inhabitant of the tropics, Malaysians, right? And after the Malay, well, probably not the Malaysians, because there's a mixture, there's like Asian, Indian, right? So there's probably these Malays way before these people migrated or invaded, and then claimed that land, being the originals of that land, the original indigenous. Okay, so the writer assumed that the next creation of a higher order was the Malay, also an inhabitant of the tropics, and after the Malay, in due course, comes the American Indian, and still in after periods, but in regular order, we have the Chinese, or rather the Turanian family, each race in its turn having a distinct origin and in no way connected with any form of creation, further than that an all-wise providence is the creator of us all, whom all admit he can create and can destroy. And last but not least, God in his wisdom and in his own image created he, male and female, Adam and Eve, the progenitors of the Caucasian race. In each successive race, from the flat-nosed and woolly-headed African to the highest type of divine creation, we are compelled to admit that the intellectual elements in each develop themselves in the same ratio as we leave the Negro and approach the white man. History proves this assertion, which will be alluded to in its proper place. The author states here, that he would also speak of the peculiar traits of character, habits, manners, and physical formation of these respective races. So it looks like he's promoting the same stuff as the Pan-Africans, the US Hebrew Israelite movement, that the black man was created first, etc., etc. Okay, then the European man was like created next. Okay, or they were albinos from the black man and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I think he's specifically saying that first was the black man, and then the Malay, and then the Chinese maybe, and then the American Indian. Okay, he came across the Bering Strait or whatever, ended up in Alaska, and then it's probably slowly moved down into the Americas. But there's the others, the Africans, the American Negroes, etc., that say no, the black man was there first. And there's a video, a documentary where an Indian, native Indian, along with this archaeologist, was looking at this rock, and he said, "Hey, look at all these pictures," and it looks like these are black people, Africans or something. They're black people. This Indian guy that was with him said, "Yeah, they were here before us. Yeah, so they were the originals of that land, but we fought them and killed them," something along those lines.